Hello, and welcome back to Seek Truth Here, the Reason Why podcast. This is where we break down why Christians believe what we believe. It's not going to be confusing or overwhelming. We keep it simple around here. We're taking one book, one chapter at a time, and just breaking it down one concept at a time. So we're reading Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. We're learning what Christianity is at its basic core and how to know it's true. Last time, chapter 1, it started out with the big question, is God real? Is there a God? And how can we know? Lewis pointed out in chapter 1 the biggest piece of evidence that we have for there being a being outside of this world. And that's our sense of right and wrong. It's a sense that spans all of human history and civilizations. He also noted that though we all seem to be aware of this moral law and that we all know we ought to keep it, we all still break it. In chapter 2, he hits the pause button for a second. Remember, these were a series of radio spots that he did over the course of a couple of years. So after the first episode aired, there were some questions and some objections that came in, naturally. So he wanted to address those. So for this episode, we're going to address a couple of objections that came up. And those are, isn't the sense of right and wrong just our instincts or a social convention? Let's learn the difference and how to explain. First, instinct. Lewis says instinct is a feeling, a strong want or desire to act a certain way. Webster and Oxford Dictionary say that it's inheritable and unalterable tendency to make complex and specific responses to environmental stimulus without involving reason. They're reactions below the conscious level, having innate behavioral patterns. For example, motherly love, responding to a baby's cry, or getting food, that's a response to our hunger instinct. Sometimes our desire to help, which is to do something good, is coming from a herd instinct. But here's the key. The desire to help is much different than a feeling that we ought to help. In our example of the desire to help somebody, that could come from our herd instinct. But then there's a second instinct as well that usually pops up, the desire not to help because we want to stay away from danger. That's our self-preservation instinct. Both are strong, innate, unconscious feelings. But there's a third impulse in there that says you ought to help. You ought to resist or suppress your instinct to flee and bring up and encourage the instinct to help. Well, this third impulse is judging between two instincts. Lewis says that judge or moral reasoning stick must be something other than just another instinct. Instinct cannot judge instinct. Just as the sheet music that a pianist plays, it tells the player what notes to play. That sheet music is not another note. A note cannot inform another note. It's the moral law that tells us which instinct to follow. It's not another instinct. Lewis says it's what makes the tune we call goodness by directing the instincts. And he cautions here to be aware that if we were to set up one of our instincts as an absolute guide of right behavior, we would not be safe. Setting up a seemingly good instinct like the love of humanity would put us in a position of doing all sorts of evil because we would be willing to do anything if it's for the good of mankind. I mean, just watch or read any dystopian fiction to see where that leads. The second big objection brought up to Lewis's claim that we all have a sense of right and wrong innately in us was that it's just a social convention. It's just something that we were taught. But Lewis points out that simply being taught something does not inherently make it a human invention. If someone grew up and were never taught the multiplication tables, they would still be there. 2 times 2 would still be 4. Math still exists whether we learn it or not. Now, another way that we can know that this moral law exists is the fact that we all tend to compare our moralities as one being better than another. I mean, we certainly think that our morality now is better than the Nazi morality. But how can we even begin to compare them if we don't all agree that there is a right that we are working to attain rather than just attaining to a personal idea of right? Lewis says the reason your idea of New York City can be truer than mine is that New York City is a real place, existing quite apart from either of our ideas. So to recap, in this chapter, we read that 1, the moral law isn't instinct because it judges between instincts and even directs our instincts. Therefore, it must be something other than instinct. 2, even though we get taught right and wrong in some ways, that does not make it merely a social convention. And 3, the simple fact of labeling some moralities better or worse than others proves there to be a rule of measurement with a real or absolute right. Lastly, if you're reading along with me, which I encourage you to do, let me know if you got a kick out of the last paragraph like I did. He gives a very unexpected example that has to do with witches. Next week in chapter 3, we will look at how the moral law is more than just a fact about human behavior. So join me next time here at the Reason Why podcast, and check out my website at seekthetruthhere.com for more resources, and follow me on Facebook and Instagram for even more stuff. I'll see you next week.